the day she learned the truth. I'll never forget that day. It started like any other, me rushing to get ready, stuffing my notebook and pen into my bag, and calling out to my dad, "I'm leaving now." He just nodded with his usual serious expression and told me to have a good day. My dad's the principal of my school. Everyone thinks that must mean I get special treatment, but honestly, I don't even tell anyone. I want to be treated like every other kid, no more, no less. My dad and I agreed to keep it quiet, and I liked it that way. That day, my first class was history with Mrs. Jefferson. She was new to the school, and I hadn't interacted with her much before. From what I'd heard, she was strict but fair. At least, that's what the other kids said. I walked into the classroom and noticed she was already there, scribbling something on the board. I made my way to my usual seat in the second row, pulled out my notebook, and waited for the lesson to start. But the moment her eyes landed on me, something shifted. She narrowed her gaze, pursed her lips, and scanned me like she was searching for something to criticize. "You," she said sharply, pointing at me. "What's your name?" "David," I replied quietly, unsure why she was singling me out. "David what?" she pressed, folding her arms. "David Adams," I answered, my voice steady. Her lips twisted into a mocking smile. "Figures. You people always have names like that, don't you?" I froze. "You people?" My stomach twisted, and I could feel the other students staring at me. Some of them looked just as shocked as I felt. "Stand up," she demanded. "You think you can just stroll into my class, slouch in your seat, and do whatever you please?" "I wasn't," I tried to explain, but she cut me off. "Don't talk back to me," she snapped. "Kids like you are always so disrespectful. No discipline, no manners." My chest tightened. I could feel my face growing hot, not just from embarrassment, but from anger. I hadn't done anything wrong, and yet here she was, tearing me down in front of everyone. "Apologize," she said, her voice icy. "For what?" I asked, unable to hide the frustration in my tone. Her face hardened. "For being disrespectful to me and disrupting my class." "I didn't disrupt anything," I said, my voice shaking. "I just sat down." The room was silent. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. "That's it," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Get out of my classroom, now." I stood there for a moment, stunned. I couldn't believe this was happening. Slowly, I grabbed my bag and started walking toward the door. "Kids like you will never amount to anything," she muttered under her breath as I passed her. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I walked out of the room, trying to hold back the tears stinging my eyes. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I wandered the halls for a while, not sure where to go. Eventually, I found myself outside my dad's office. I hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door. "Come in," he called. I stepped inside and he immediately noticed something was wrong. "David, what happened?" I told him everything. As I spoke, the anger on his face grew. By the time I finished, his hands were clenched into fists. "Wait here," he said, his voice cold and controlled. I watched as he walked out of his office and down the hall toward Mrs. Jefferson's classroom. A few minutes later, he returned, with her following behind him. Her face was pale, and her eyes darted between me and my dad. "Mrs. Jefferson," my dad said, his voice firm, "I'd like you to meet my son." Her eyes widened in shock. Your son?" "Yes," he said, "the same student you humiliated and disrespected in front of the entire class." She opened her mouth to say something, but closed it again. "I'll be having a formal meeting with you and the school board later today," my dad continued. "But for now, you owe my son an apology." Mrs. Jefferson turned to me, her face red with embarrassment. I'm sorry," she stammered. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, my emotions too jumbled to put into words. That day taught me a lot. It taught me how deeply prejudice can run, how some people will judge you before they even know you. But it also taught me about standing up for myself and the power of having someone in my corner. Mrs. Jefferson didn't last long at our school. And me? I walked into class the next day with my head held high, determined to prove her wrong. If this story moved you, don't forget to share it with others and let us know your thoughts in the comments. How would you have handled the challenges David faced? Subscribe for more powerful and eye-opening stories that touch the heart and inspire action. Remember, everyone deserves respect and understanding. Let's keep the conversation going.